Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today, I want to talk to you about corporations and why we should stop supporting major game publishers as soon as possible. In the other video documentary I made talking about games, I spoke at length about why we're not enjoying games anymore and how to enjoy them again. But now is the time where I dedicate an entire video to raise awareness of the fact that we're soon going to see the video games industry as a whole crumble down to the foundation, and why it's better to boycott them now than when it's too late. This might seem like a serious take all of a sudden, or seem like I'm fear-mongering, but I'm being completely honest when I tell you that the end is near, and if you look at the right places closely enough, you'll see what I mean. In the 1950s, video games would become a thing due to computer science research. The very first seeds of what would become a global phenomenon were planted with simple experiments on large room-sized computers. One of the earliest examples being Tennis for Two, made by the physicist William Higginbotham in 1958. This simple game, which was displayed on an oscilloscope and was composed of a ball, ground, and net, allowed players to simulate a tennis match, showcasing the potential power of interactive entertainment. In the 1960s, computer technology was largely reserved for academic or military usage. But that didn't stop innovators like MIT's Steve Russell from seizing the opportunity and seeing whether or not it had the potential he was imagining. Russell developed Spacewar on the PDP-1, which featured two spaceships engaging in battle around a star, complete with gravity effects. The game was a revolutionary concept at the time, therefore it was distributed over various universities, spreading the idea of video games and showcasing its potential, inadvertently inspiring many students to become developers themselves. The 1970s marked the transition from academic curiosities to commercial products, which gave birth to the arcade era. This decade is marked largely by the release of Atari's Pong in 1972, a game by Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn. Pong was a simple and addictive table tennis game that became a massive hit in arcades, leading to the birth of the arcade game industry. Following the release of Pong, the 70s also saw the release of more iconic and complex games like Space Invaders and Asteroids. These games introduced high scores, creating a competitive atmosphere and culture around the arcades and captivating players even more. The 1980s marked the rise of consoles, with the Atari 2600 moving the arcade right into your living room. It included games like Pitfall and Adventure. The 80s were also dubbed the golden age of arcade games due to including beloved titles like Namco's Pac-Man and Nintendo's Donkey Kong, turning them into household names. This is also when Mario got his first debut and became synonymous with video games from there on after. But perhaps the most notable event that happened by far during the 1980s was the Atari shock. The 1983 video game crash, also known as the Atari shock in Japan, was a significant event that almost obliterated the North American video game industry. This came as a result of several core causes, such as the saturation of the market, poor quality control, and the emergence of the PC. But to summarize, there were too many consoles coming out alongside too many games. These different consoles needed to be spearheaded by different companies. Therefore, an intense fragmentation and divide happened in the scene as everyone was rushing to make their own consoles a thing in this new, booming, and emerging medium. So, in order to capitalize on said booming market, developers would rush to create games without any consideration for quality control or testing, thus effectively flooding the video game market with inferior, barely functional products. The most popular of these failures being E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which is often cited as one of the worst games ever made, critically damaging Atari's reputation. Another reason was the emerging PC market, with computers like the Apple II, Commodore 64, and IBM PC offering a much more layered experience. They also had massive appeal due to being able to handle more than just games and having many broader uses, which repelled customers from consoles. But perhaps the root of all this, and the main core cause, was less about video games and more about economics. The early 1980s suffered a recession which reduced the amount of money people were willing to spend on video gaming. Couple this with an overwhelming investment by game companies in order to capitalize on the market and get their foot in the door while it's still fresh, and you get a crash that was the product of expectations, hope, and corporate greed and aspiration. This almost destroyed all of North American gaming due to the absurd decline in revenue for the video game industry. In only 2 short years, revenues skydove from $3.2 billion million in 1983 to just barely 100 million in 1985. Many publishers and developers went out of business due to not being able to cope with the financial strains. Consumers became aware of the scummy practices that were implemented in games, thus reducing the trust they had in the purchases, and impeding the market's recovery process even more. This also led to retailers significantly reducing the shelf spaces that were reserved for video games. Some even stopped stockpiling them altogether. And the only reason that there still is a video games industry in North America today was Japan. Seeing what just transpired across the ocean, Japan could do what it couldn't do before, and cement itself as the savior, assurance, and quality control that was desperately needed at the time. Companies like Nintendo played a crucial role in reviving the industry, thanks to their disciplined approach to game production and innovative marketing strategies that were instrumental in reviving consumer confidence. This all came into being with the release of the NES in 1985. And with this console, Nintendo emphasized quality and reliability. There's a reason they called it Nintendo's entertainment system rather than video game console. That in itself helped distance it from the negative connotations tied to previous failed systems. Nintendo to this day also maintains an admirable level of quality control. That's why all their games sell for $60, regardless of how old or new they are. Because when you buy Nintendo, you buy a promise that has been tried and tested throughout time. When you get Nintendo, you get every cent's value back and more. This persistence and quality dated back to those same years where Nintendo implemented Nintendo's seal of quality, which was vital for building trust with consumers and retailers alike. Add the fact that Nintendo came packing with titles like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda, even offering bundles that paired those games with every NES purchase, and you have yourself the savior that everyone asked for but no one deserved. This is why you see people to this day praising, buying, and defending Nintendo. They kept their promise to those same people all those years ago and all the way to today. Therefore, the consumers happily purchase. One more amazing thing that Nintendo did was their strict license agreement for third-party developers, ensuring that only high-quality games were produced for their system. This control over game quality kept the NES from becoming any other North American console and granted consumers immense trust. All this resulted in higher quality games, fewer competition due to weeding out the leeching bad companies, and more savvy consumers who knew what they wanted and where to get it from. An entire cultural shift happened with icons and franchises blooming, with characters that still define gaming to this day, like Mario and Link. And finally, the success of Nintendo and later Sega resulted in the globalization of gaming as a whole, as it reached every nook and cranny of the world. To continue where we left off after the crash, we go into the 1990s, where household consoles were revived, alongside customer trust. The 1990s also marked the entrance of Sega's Genesis, and later the SNES. These were the start of famous console wars, as each vied for dominance with iconic games like Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario World. One major technological shift that happened was the advent of 3D graphics. Nintendo's Super Mario 64 and Sony's PlayStation released groundbreaking titles like Final Fantasy VII and Metal Gear Solid, showcasing the potential of 3D environments and complex storytelling. The 2000s were the years of better networking and better graphics. Gaming seemingly shifted towards online gaming, with consoles like Microsoft's Xbox and Sony's PlayStation 2 introducing online capabilities, allowing players to connect and compete globally. The most popular of such games was Halo 2. This decade also marked the transition to HD, or high-definition graphics. With the release of the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, games like Gears of War and Uncharted Drake's Fortune demonstrated the new visual capabilities of graphics hardware and were stunning to players at the time for having such detailed worlds. Nintendo took a different approach, focusing on motion control and accessibility, netting us the Wii, which would attract a broader audience and bring in people who previously weren't interested in gaming at all. The 2010s saw the rise of indie games, made possible by digital distribution platforms like Steam. Titles like Undertale, Terraria, RimWorld, Celeste, and Minecraft proved that small teams could create impactful and innovative games, often exploring the artistic styles and gameplay mechanics. This decade also witnessed the emergence of virtual reality, with devices like the Oculus Rift and PlayStation VR, which aimed to create immersive gaming experiences. There were also games that went outside of conventional boundaries, such as Skyrim, Breath of the Wild, and The Witcher 3, setting new benchmarks for open world design and storytelling. Then we arrive here, to the 2020s, where we got consoles such as the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X that pushed the boundaries of graphical fidelity. Ray tracing and ultra-fast SSDs enhanced realism and shortened load times, while cloud gaming services like Google Stadia and Microsoft xCloud promised to make high-end gaming accessible without the need for expensive hardware. The focus of video games nowadays is entirely on banking on those graphical features, as logically, the final form of video games was always to go beyond the directions of Super Mario World, and see a better quality than Super Mario 64, and enjoy more freedom than linear games offered, and have games that allow you to do many things at once, or allowing you to do whatever you wanted to do at any time. This is why the creation of expansive and immersive worlds and delivering narratives that rival those of film and literature is the focal point of this half-decade, with games like Cyberpunk 2077 and The Last of Us 2 reflecting this trend. These bigger games are no doubt marvels of technology and are the embodiments of the dreams or aspirations of someone who wished to see just how far gaming could go all those years ago. But there's a good question that you might not have asked yourself. Where do these games come from? In future chapters, I'm going to be saying many not very nice things about major publishers and video game companies. So, in the case that you're someone who likes these companies and wants to defend these companies, let me give you some data. This data will be providing you the track record of the industries you so love and enjoy. In 2004, a user known as EA Spouse, later identified Aaron Hoffman, complained that her spouse, a developer at EA, was forced by management to work 13-hour days 7 days a week, with a potential for early leave at 6:30 p.m. on Saturdays for good behavior. All this without any overtime compensation, not in sick leaves nor in pay. Such work conditions were causing her husband to suffer stomach problems and chronic headaches. Hoffman also said that these work conditions were not implemented due to approaching a deadline, nor due to system failures that required maintenance. It was intentionally designed as a part of a productive schedule. EA eventually faced 2 class action lawsuits in Kirschenbaum versus Electronic Arts and Hasty versus Electronic Arts, in which EA was alleged to have intentionally misclassified its programmers under California labor law, so that they do not receive overtime compensation. EA obviously settled both class actions for a total of about $30 million, thus leaving the issues persisting for another day. This letter is known as the EA Spouse Letter and was the first ray of light that was shined on the labor conditions in the offices of the most popular video game studios and publishers. Later in 2010, spouses of developers working at Rockstar Games' San Diego studio on Red Dead Redemption posted an online letter in much the same fashion as Hoffman. The letter alleged a disturbingly similar work environment in Rockstar San Diego, such as 90-hour weeks, project mismanagement, and chronic health problems, including depression and suicidal tendencies from the extended crunch. These were also settled out of court. The co-founder of Rockstar Games, Dan Houser, was even seen profoundly claiming, quote, "We're working 100-hour weeks," end quote, during an interview with New York Magazine in 2018 regarding the imminent launch of Red Dead Redemption 2. Houser later attempted to backpedal from this statement, saying that he was only referring to himself and some other higher-ups in the company. Regardless if his statement was made as marketing hype or not, the reality of 100-hour weeks is terrifying to even think about. As awareness increased, more people are coming out about their experiences with crunch. The sudden closure of Telltale Games in 2018 revealed how a once highly successful small studio took on too many projects at once, which resulted in widespread crunch of 50 to 70 hours per week. In 2019, a number of ex-developers for Epic Games' Fortnite disclosed in interviews that they had worked more than 70 hours per week for months to support the game after its launch in September 2017. Finally, as a case in point that crunch is not exclusive to video game development in the West, Polish video game studio CD Projekt Red announced in mid-2020 that its employees will be forced to work overtime in order for its new game Cyberpunk 2077 to meet the advertised launch date in the 2020 holiday season, even though the studio had previously promised that it will be able to avoid crunch. For a statistical portrait of the state of crunch in the video game industry, the International Game Developers Association, or the IGDA, a non-profit organization formed in 1994 to support game developers around the world, world has been conducting developer satisfaction surveys, or DSS, biannually since 2014 to compile information about the well-being and opinions of video game developers worldwide. According to the 2021 DSS, slightly over half of all respondents have experienced crunch in their jobs. Amongst those who experienced crunch, about 60% experienced crunch sessions more than twice over the past 2 years, which the IGDA noted was a large increase over the 35% reported in the 2019 DSS. In addition, about 55% of employees who experienced crunch worked at least 50 hours a week during those crunch sessions. But this is only a slight reduction from the 2019 DSS, which reported nearly 70% working those hours and more. Nevertheless, there are still reports of 80-plus hour weeks. And I've been talking about crunch for a while, so let's talk about what crunch is. But first of all, let's talk about laws. Most, if not all, jurisdictions around the world today have some form of overtime labor law in recognition of the horrible effects of overwork on the general well-being of an individual. The current medical consensus is that for the vast majority of the population, work efficiency starts to drop rapidly above 50 to 55 hours per week, and an employee working 70 hours a week might not be doing anything more productive than someone who's working 50 hours a week. While short-term overwork generally doesn't cause any significant issues, extended periods of overwork for several weeks or more carry a dramatically higher risk of developing serious chronic medical issues such as stress, headaches, back and neck pain, cardiovascular disease, as well as psychological issues such as depression, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Those psychological issues can then cause potentially irreparable damage to relationships with friends and loved ones. Due to the negative impact on the overall economy of an overworked workforce, there is an interest for governments to ensure that employers are deterred from unnecessarily causing their employees to work excessive hours. These periods of excessive overwork are known as crunch. Now the question becomes, what causes crunch? Video games are a unique visual and interactive medium, reliant on the technological capabilities of gaming platforms. As technology advanced, so did the expectation for games. Unlike the simple pixelated soccer games of the late 1980s on the NES, modern games like FIFA feature detailed player likeness, higher resolution stadiums, and sophisticated gameplay, including intricate player movements and tactics. This evolution demands extensive coordination amongst specialist teams and thorough programming and testing. Despite advancements in development tools, creating a modern video game requires a vast and diverse talent pool, making project management incredibly challenging. Quality assurance testers, or QA testers, often suffer the most, with 56% of QA respondents in the DSS survey accepting crunch as a normal part of the job. Due to the complexity of modern games, QA is time-consuming and often insufficient to catch all the bugs before launch. This leads developers to rely on post-launch patches, causing low job satisfaction among QA testers, who face forced crunch and see their efforts deferred or ignored. This increase in video game complexity has in turn caused development costs to spike significantly, with big-budget AAA games now costing hundreds of millions of dollars and involving large teams over multiple years. Some of the most expensive games include Cyberpunk 2077, which took around $170 million in development and $140 million in marketing. Grand Theft Auto 5, which took around $300 million total. Red Dead Redemption 2, which took $350 million to $500 million total. Star Citizen, which is a crowd-funded game that is still in development to this day, and it's taken $330 million so far. Most of these games recouped their costs quickly, with Grand Theft Auto 5 becoming the #2 best-selling video game of all time. Publicly listed video game publishers rely heavily on AAA game sales. Despite the move towards in-game purchases and downloadable content, publishers must manage commercial risk, which can conflict with the development process and lead to crunch. A key issue is the lack of individuals with game development backgrounds who are in executive positions at major publishers. Executives at companies like Take-Two, Electronic Arts, Activision Blizzard, and Ubisoft often have business or law backgrounds, resulting in tone-deaf decisions and support for crunch practices. Trend chasing is one instance of questionable decision-making. Publishers rush to include popular new gameplay trends, like Battle Royale modes, without considering the problems that would cause for project management. This can lead to rushed development and excessive crunch. as seen with Call of Duty Black Ops 4 and Battlefield 5, which had lukewarm receptions at best for their Battle Royale modes. Feature creep is another issue, where additional features complicate development and lead to chaos. Without proper management, these features can result in a disjointed final product, as seen in sequels where vague ambitions lead to half-baked feature bloat. Marketing also indirectly causes crunch. Publishers build anticipation years in advance, often before the development even starts, creating pressure to meet consumer expectations based on marketing materials. This was notably problematic for Cyberpunk 2077, which faced significant backlash due to unmet promises and numerous bugs at launch. The game's troubled development and rushed release led to substantial consumer dissatisfaction and financial repercussions for CD Projekt Red. PlayStation even started issuing refunds for people who bought Cyberpunk 2077. That's how broken the game was. The 2021 Developer Satisfaction Survey, or DSS, revealed that nearly half of the respondents expect to stay with their current video game company for only 1 to 3 years. This trend aligns with the average duration of game projects, as talent is often hired on a project basis rather than for the long term with the studio. Consequently, when a project concludes, the additional hires made during development are typically laid off to reduce operating expenses, irrespective of the game's commercial success. This environment of limited job security contributes significantly to employees' acceptance of crunch. The video game industry largely comprises young 25 to 40-year-olds who have been passionate about games since childhood. The enduring popularity of video games ensures a steady influx of individuals eager for a career in video game development, making positions at major studios highly competitive and viewed as a privilege. Consider an entry-level programmer hired by Rockstar to work on the next Grand Theft Auto, tasked with programming the car physics. Car physics are crucial to how the game feels, making success in this area a valuable resume accomplishment. If internal QA feedback dictates a rework of the car physics, resulting in a crunch period, our programmer would face significant non-verbal pressure to participate. The unspoken understanding of the privilege of working on Grand Theft Auto and the camaraderie developed with colleagues would compel the programmer to join the crunch. Leaving the job would mean nothing to show on their resume and possible exclusion from the credits due to Rockstar's policy, while leaving early during crunch could label them as not a team player and jeopardize their job security. This peer pressure aspect of crunch is supported by the 2019 DSS results, where 30% of people cited people are doing it voluntarily as a reason for crunch, though only 4% believed it was vital to game development. This suggests that a few individuals who see crunch as beneficial or frequently work long hours can pressure others to do the same. Without labor protections like collectively bargained employment terms, as in unions, developers often feel that they have no choice but to voluntarily crunch to safeguard their careers. But this isn't to say that crunch is exclusive to larger studios. Smaller indie studios and developers for free-to-play games are not immune to crunch. For free-to-play games, revenue depends on in-game purchases. Players will stop spending money or quit if they believe they've experienced all of the game. Unlike traditional one-time payment models, free-to-play developers must continuously release new content to keep players engaged and spending. Consequently, maintaining player engagement becomes a crucial success metric, often leading to extended or indefinite crunch periods. For instance, Fortnite's unexpected popularity with its Battle Royale mode, initially an experiment to revive the game, led to a massive influx of support tickets and the need for rapid strategy overhauls. Senior personnel trained new hires quickly, and the lack of clear direction and constant changes resulted in crunch, with deadlines measured in days or weeks rather than months or years. As free-to-play games with higher production values become more common, their production issues may mirror those of AAA developers. Smaller or indie developers face similar challenges, even on small-scale projects. Limited resources and manpower can lead to long hours, particularly in quality assurance. Self-publishing studios may not face external pressure from a parent publisher, but still feel internal pressure to release games promptly to maintain cash flow. Telltale Games, with around 300 employees at its peak, is an example. Known for The Walking Dead, the studio's rapid expansion and heavy crunch to release multiple games led to technological stagnation and declining quality. Financial difficulties culminated in its closure in 2018 after two prospective investors withdrew funding. Telltale's story highlights self-inflicted pressure to crunch. The studio's business model of taking on numerous projects simultaneously may have stemmed from a belief that continuous releases would attract franchises and investors. However, the resulting crunch and declining game quality showed the fallacy of this approach, as repetitive gameplay and lazy writing alienated audiences and investors. Now here's my favorite segment in videos where I go on an unfiltered rampage and get everything out of my system. Seeing all I've told you, it's really not far-fetched to compare the video games industry to a sweatshop economy. Imagine you're a developer for these publishers and companies. You go to work, get sexually assaulted, get berated and belittled, and get overworked only to get laid off and kicked out the team for no good reason or because the project is over and they no longer have any need for you, and throw you out on the street. These employees are also on the hush-hush due to having to sign very aggressive NDAs or non-disclosure agreements upon being hired. To compare this to a topical situation happening right now, all the video game publishers and studios are essentially Mr. Beast and are overworking, harming, underfeeding, mismanaging, and manipulating the participants and threatening them with litigation if they dare speak out. The video games industry is no longer what it used to be. These are no longer games. All these companies are in the stock market. They have investors that they need to please. Investors who expect a return on investment, which basically turns the conversation, scope, and focus entirely between the owners of the company and executives and the investors and shareholders. Games suck today because they're made to be purchased and monetized. If you think content is made for you, packs are made for you, things are made for you, then you're a fucking idiot. They're all just made for your wallet. Skins don't come out for every character in the game. They come out only for the top 10% of the characters that are played in the game, or come out as parodies of the most popular movies in Hollywood. Their goal isn't to make you happy. Their goal is to get your money. You do not matter here. No one needs or wants to satisfy your wishes. They just go along with something good that you already like and make copies of it to monetize the living shit out of every crevice. Don't be surprised if you're going to be required to watch a 30-second ad with forced eye contact before you're allowed to play your games in the future. You buying all these AAA games comes at a cost. Why would you fund such people? You're literally participating in a sweatshop economy, and your graphics come at the cost of human lives that have no alternative but to seek such places to earn their living. This is pretty much like prostitution, where your joy comes from having other people get fucked. We need to stop this. We need to boycott these places. Why are people so quick to shut down people and studios and personnel for not having a character with 42 genders or having them be a certain race, and make posts that amassed public outrage for no fucking reason? But everyone is so accepting of the work conditions all of these different people with different religions, ethnicities, and races go through. Why is nobody crusading for the people who have their mouths stitched shut and their hands tied? And more importantly, after hearing all this, why the fuck would you support this? Why do you pay microtransactions? Why do you buy AAA games? Why do you fund these publishers? Is your life that vacuous? Are you so hypnotized by social media and the inherent purposelessness of your life that you're making these purchases just as how you do everything else, which is to say without any thought, because you're a fucking brain-dead zombie due to how we're made to live today? Just fucking think about it for a second. In Red Dead Redemption 2, the testicles of the horses shrivel up in the cold. Someone had to animate horse testicles shriveling up in the fucking cold. How is that humane? Who noticed this detail? Who praised this detail? Who greenlit this detail? Who rated the game based on this detail? This is all work hours. Hours wasted from somebody's fucking life. A human being's life, lost hours of his life animating horse testicles. Those are all work hours wasted, barely noticed by the majority of the fucking player base. Unpaid work hours put in by a wife or husband, sister or brother, mother or father, uncle or aunt of real humans that had to suffer because of this benign, degenerate level of detail. How would you feel if these people were your family members? Would you think it humane if your parents or siblings were the ones who are undergoing the same conditions, coming back home late in the evening barely functional with deteriorated health? If not, why don't you consider that these are also parents and siblings of people just like you, who are suffering because of it. COVID 19 wasn't that long ago. Did you not have friends and family who lost their jobs? Do you not remember how devastating it was for them and their families? Living in that constant state of job insecurity? These people who work in the games industry at any level below the executive are at a constant risk of COVID 19 level layoffs every couple quarters. Bungie just did mass layoffs that were planned. Regardless of how Destiny 2 would perform, they planned mass layoffs. And wouldn't you know it, the whole thing occurred due to executive mismanagement. Like, fuck, man. Who would have thought? What the fuck is wrong with society? You know what's funny? I'll tell you what's funny right now. The worst of this is yet to come because I'm 4,895 words into this script and I still haven't brought up artificial intelligence. I mentioned in the last video that I graduated with a computer science degree. It also is relevant to mention that I have always loved computers and have been disassembling TV controllers ever since I was 3. A year before I graduated up until now, I've been working and paving the way to become a machine learning engineer because artificial intelligence is amazing. Imagine automating the stupid tasks that you no longer have to dedicate any attention or energy towards. It's like having your very own secretary. Dumb labor like checking spam emails and removing them from your cluttered mailbox, and actions that you'd need to repeat all the time could be sorted out for you at an instant so that you focus all your attention and energy on the things that are worthy of them. It truly is a marvel that has been in development for nearly 70 years, only improving more and more by the end of each decade. It's such a pure and fascinating creation. It's like a canvas on its own. What you do with it, how you teach it, how you allow it to distinguish from right and wrong, and see it grow in front of you like a child, becoming smarter, becoming faster, becoming more sophisticated. It's truly captivating. But just like we bred wolves into chihuahuas as a direct insult to God and his domain, humans keep finding ways to fuck up not only the natural order, but the artificial one as well. Imagine that you have this white canvas at your disposal, that according to your skill set and available data, you could make it do anything. People looked at it and went, oh yeah, let's make it do creative stuff because we can't be bothered to do it ourselves. Like we as a species are flawed. Machines can never be creative because the concept of artificial intelligence is in itself an oxymoron. You cannot be intelligent and artificial at the same time. If it's artificial, then it's not intelligent. It's called machine learning, not machine thinking. So, we dedicated all this processing power, all this money, all these resources to try to outdo people who have spent a lifetime perfecting a skill set and adding that natural flavor to our existence through music, art, poetry, whatever. Remember that you, the person who's watching this video right now, have more of a chance to create the next Minecraft right where you are with your current skill set than any corporation can ever dream to have. Beloved indie games, the games that make you feel and laugh and cry and evoke emotions in you. These are human. These are felt. Corporations could never attempt to replicate this. Corporations don't have souls. They don't care about making you feel. They care about numbing you. They're just as emotionally available as the artificial models themselves. And guess what's gonna happen? If you think these companies will look at artificial intelligence and ponder how much of the load they can take off their employees, then you need to wake up, because these places don't care about their employees. You're more likely to be sexually assaulted and harassed working in a video game studio than if you were to roam the streets at night. These people don't care about their employees. So in your opinion, what do you think these benevolent, quality-producing, fan-favorite corporations will do? That's right, they'll cut as much cost as possible. They will remove the humans and the human element from their games altogether. If you think their games are bad and copy-paste and unoriginal and offensively bad now, give it 2 to 4 years when the AI titles will pop out. Then everyone will wake up and stop playing the games altogether. If you can recall a couple chapters ago, then you'll realize that the Atari shock is on the way to repeat, and this time, not even Japan will be able to save it. We didn't go anywhere. We just went from one side of the spectrum to the other. Instead of way too many games and companies, we have way too little. Instead of understaffed companies, we have them overstaffed. Instead of many low-quality games a year, we have some high-quality games every 2 to 4 years. And mind you, the quality is just graphic. Instead of being underfunded and having no budget, we have all the money to spend. So much so that being advertised to in your main menu in your video game has become normal. How far have we fallen to allow such practices to exist? If you told anyone or these same people that one day you'd load up Crash Bandicoot and have a fucking DLC tab and a customization tab with options to buy currency that doesn't exist with real money that you worked for, they'd probably think you're insane. Even if it was possible, they'll probably tell you that no one will ever pick those games up due to it being predatory. Imagine saying this to someone in the 1950s that shoot you point blank. Games are supposed to be one-time purchases. No? Well, not anymore. We have normalized and commercialized our hobby to a point where we have no say whatsoever in what's happening, as companies are too busy pleasing investors and shareholders to have any time to care about your needs and desires. As long as your wallet has disposable income in it, these companies will compete to get every cent you have, and then compete for every cent you don't. I won't add another chapter because frankly there's no need for padding out the video. How do we fix this? Boycott them. Fuck them. Pressure them. Because you know what's gonna happen when AI development becomes more mainstream? All these employees, all these developers, all these artists who are already in this much job insecurity will become permanently out of a job. When discussing AI, everyone thought that dumb labor would be the first to go. You know, truck drivers, Amazon workers, deliveries. But no, humans function backwards. You're thinking that way because you're a human, you have heart, you have soul. But do you think the people at the top give a fuck about lowering the burden of people who are working 12-hour shifts a day? Why would they keep these borderline slaves out of a job and keep those people with a skill set in jobs? No, my friend, they'll go for everyone with jobs, good jobs at that. Because if everyone's gone, the only creation that will be listening like a good dog to all these elites, all these executives, all these capitalists who would commercialize breathing air if they could, would be the machines that have no concept of morality. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it opened your eyes a bit to the reality of our situation and that we really need to put immense pressure to force a soft crash of the industry before a very massive one happens. Because at the end of the day, the hedge fund capitalist investor stakeholder types are used to gaining and losing money. But it will be me and you who will suffer the most from this. To them, this was just a misadventure that they thought would be fruitful and profitable, but wasn't. To us, our entire hobby and pastime would be ruined, with many, many people's lives who are like me and you, passionate about games, passionate about creating games, who went the step further that me and you didn't, to create games and to be part of the amazing process that they were mesmerized by as children, semi-permanently have their livelihoods ruined. I have 7,000 hours on League of Legends. If I were to sell my account, regardless of the limited time skins I have, the icons, the things that were exclusive to a single event that will never come back, and things I worked for 7 years, someone would buy that account off of me for no more than $100. $100 for my memories, my hardships, my labor, my emotions, my work put into this account for $100 fucking. This is how corporations view games and how they view us. It means nothing but money to them, and the money easily comes and goes for all of us. But they have no investment, no attachment, no experience, feeling the joy and love that we do for our games. Fuck the elite, fuck the executives, and fuck major publishers. Boycott them and help those who work these conditions and on these companies unionize and blow their whistles. Thank you very much once again for watching this video. I appreciate your time and attention. If this video was enjoyable to you, then please consider giving me a like. And if you want to see more content of this type, definitely subscribe since I won't disappoint you. Have an amazing day and take care of yourself and be well.